Of relentless fighting, the Middle East's month-long conflict has entered a new, more dangerous phase, with tensions rising and the stakes growing higher by the day. What began as a localized confrontation has now evolved into a regional crisis, drawing in new actors and threatening to spiral out of control. On March 28, 2026, Yemen's Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, launched their first direct missile attack on Israel. This unprecedented move opened a volatile southern front, catching many by surprise and signalling a dramatic escalation in the conflict's scope. The war has now become a multi-front crisis, stretching from Lebanon in the north to the Red Sea in the south. With each new front, the risk of a wider regional war increases, threatening not only local stability, but also the fragile balance of global security. The Houthis' strike demonstrates Iran's growing ability to project power far beyond its borders, using proxies to challenge Israel and its allies. Israel is now forced to divert critical resources, stretching its air defences thin and putting immense pressure on its military command. With the Bab el-Mandeb Strait now at risk, a second major shipping lane could be disrupted. This vital maritime choke point is essential for global trade, and any prolonged instability here could send shockwaves through the world economy, affecting energy prices and supply chains worldwide. As the conflict expands and uncertainty grows, the world watches anxiously. Governments, markets and ordinary people alike are bracing for the potential fallout, as the stakes for international peace and economic security have never been higher. March the 28th began with air raid sirens across southern Israel as Houthi ballistic missiles targeted sensitive military sites. Israel's Arrow defense system intercepted the attack, preventing casualties, but the psychological impact was profound. The Houthis, emboldened by Iranian support, signaled this was just the beginning of a sustained campaign. Israel now faces the threat of coordinated attacks from multiple directions, testing the limits of its defences. The Houthis, or Ansar Allah, are no longer just a Yemeni insurgency. They're a battle-hardened force controlling northern Yemen and Sana'a since 2014. Backed by Iran, they've survived years of war and launched sophisticated attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Their recent missile strike on Israel marks their evolution into direct combatants in a regional war. The Houthis' control of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and their advanced arsenal make them a formidable threat. Their anti-American, anti-Israeli ideology and willingness to absorb punishment amplify the danger they pose. Iran's strategy of using proxies like the Houthis is now reshaping the Middle East conflict. The war erupted suddenly on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched coordinated preemptive strikes deep inside Iranian territory. These attacks shattered decades-old red lines and ignited a chain reaction across the region, marking a turning point in Middle Eastern history. The world watched in shock as the first missiles struck, signaling the start of a conflict that would quickly spiral out of control. Iran responded swiftly and fiercely, unleashing waves of missile and drone attacks on Israeli cities and US military bases. The retaliation was devastating, causing hundreds of casualties and leaving entire neighborhoods in ruins. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, and families were torn apart by the violence. In response, Israel launched a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, determined to confront Hezbollah militants head-on. The border region became a war zone, with fierce battles erupting in towns and villages. The fighting turned northern Israel and southern Lebanon into a bloody battleground. Civilian casualties soared, with over 3,000 dead and many more injured or displaced. The humanitarian crisis deepened by the day. Major cities like Tel Aviv, Beirut and Tehran now live under constant threat, their skylines darkened by smoke and fear. Despite urgent diplomatic efforts, ceasefire proposals have been repeatedly rejected, and peace talks remain stalled, leaving the region trapped in a cycle of violence. On March 28th, the conflict widened further as Houthi militants in Yemen launched their own attacks, signaling that Iran's allies across the region are fully committed to the fight. The war now stretches from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, threatening vital shipping lanes and global trade. The entire region teeters on the edge of a wider catastrophe. Military convoys race through deserts, borders bristle with tension, and ordinary people huddle in shelters, anxiously awaiting news of what comes next. As the war's human and geopolitical toll mounts, the world faces a crisis with no clear end in sight, and the consequences threaten to reshape the Middle East for generations to come. The Houthis' entry shifts focus to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a choke point for 12% of global trade and vital energy supplies. With the Strait of Hormuz already closed, Bab el-Mandeb's security is now critical for global stability. The Houthis have threatened to close the strait, and their proven ability to strike ships makes this a real danger. A closure would force ships to reroute around Africa, causing massive delays, higher costs, and global supply chain chaos. Europe, heavily reliant on Red Sea LNG imports, faces the risk of an energy crisis. The next Houthi move could trigger an economic shockwave worldwide. The Houthi attack sent oil prices soaring above $100 a barrel, rattling already fragile global markets. Major shipping lines like Maersk halted Red Sea routes, and ports suspended operations after drone attacks, compounding disruptions. Soaring energy prices and snarled supply chains threaten global inflation and economic recovery. Central banks now face the spectre of stagflation as costs rise for businesses and consumers. The reliability of global trade is in question, with two key maritime choke points under threat. The world faces the real risk of a prolonged conflict tipping the global economy into recession. The war's expansion to Yemen is redrawing global alliances and exposing deep divisions that run far deeper than many anticipated. As the conflict spills across borders, old partnerships are tested and new, sometimes uneasy coalitions begin to form. The shifting landscape is forcing countries to reconsider their priorities and allegiances, with ripple effects felt across continents. The US now faces a complex multi-front crisis, supporting Israel militarily and diplomatically, deterring Iran's ambitions and countering mounting threats to global shipping lanes that are vital for international trade. American policymakers are under pressure to balance these competing interests, all while maintaining credibility with allies and avoiding direct confrontation with adversaries. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are increasingly wary of escalation, fearing that further conflict could destabilize their own borders and threaten economic stability. Behind closed doors, leaders weigh the risks of involvement against the dangers of inaction, knowing that any misstep could have lasting consequences for the region. Meanwhile, countries like Pakistan and Turkey scramble to mediate, hoping to prevent a wider war. Their diplomatic efforts reflect both a desire for regional stability and an opportunity to assert their influence on the world stage, even as the odds of success remain uncertain. China and Russia, on the other hand, see opportunities to challenge US influence and strengthen their own ties with Iran. By deepening cooperation, they hope to reshape the balance of power in the region and expand their global reach, often at the expense of Western interests. The United Nations, once a forum for resolving such crises, is increasingly sidelined, unable to bridge the widening divide between major powers. Diplomatic paralysis leaves the world without a clear path forward, as rivalries and mistrust overshadow efforts at cooperation. The Houthi attack in Yemen underscores the complexity of a conflict involving both state and non-state actors, each with their own agendas and backers. This tangled web of interests makes resolution even more elusive as local grievances intersect with global rivalries. As diplomatic solutions slip further out of reach, the world grows more fragmented and dangerous. The stakes are higher than ever, and the consequences of inaction or miscalculation could reverberate for years to come. Israel and the US are rapidly reinforcing their military posture for a prolonged multi-front war. Israel recalibrates its defenses, preparing for more complex attacks and possible strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. The US deploys elite paratroopers and Marines, marking its largest regional buildup in decades. American forces are stretched thin, facing casualties and logistical challenges. The alliance must now defend against threats from Hezbollah, Iran and the Houthis, forcing tough choices on asset allocation. Any US action to secure the Bab el-Mandeb risks deeper entanglement and further escalation. The region stands on a knife's edge, with every move carrying the risk of a wider war. The world now faces urgent questions. Will the Houthis close the Bab el-Mandeb, triggering global economic chaos? Can diplomacy succeed as Iran's proxies open new fronts and ceasefire talks stall? The hope for peace is fading as the conflict threatens to engulf the region and disrupt global trade. The risk of miscalculation, one missile, one mistake, could spark uncontrollable escalation. The international community is no longer a bystander. Everyone's security and prosperity are at stake. The choices made in the coming days will determine if the world can pull back from the brink. The thread holding global stability is fraying and may soon snap.